You're listening to Truth to Power Live with Dumisani Washington. All right, everyone. Truth to Power Live, Dumisani Washington. I am Dumisani Washington, your host here on this podcast / radio show on this Sunday, January the 5th, 2025, first Sunday in the Gregorian calendar on this new year. How you doing, everyone? Happy New Year to everybody. Hope you had a great holiday, Christmas, Hanukkah, New Year's, all of that stuff. Some have been back to work. Some are headed back there on tomorrow. School in another week or two. And if you're like some of our college students back when our kids were still in college, maybe in a few more weeks. So it's great to be with you on today. All right, we got to get into this here. I was not going to cover this. This was not former President Jimmy Carter passed away at 100 years old. Happy 2025 to you two out there, David Misrahi. And can I see all of my comments? That's the other thing too. Let me double check here. Last week I did it wrong. Something was not happening, but I guess it's happening now. I guess it's all good, right? So Jimmy Carter passed away about a week or not 2 weeks ago. It hasn't been 2 weeks. It's been about a week or so. You know, I didn't like him as a president. I don't have a personal vendetta against him. I was a little kid while he was president. I learned about his presidency a little bit later on, did a deeper dive later on from that. And so I was content to just, hey, he passed away, not really say anything and deal with it at all. For me and for this show, and probably for the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, which is not, again, directly connected here. I'm the founder and the CEO of the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel. But this show deals with lots of different things, including the Bible, music, politics, culture, the Black American community, current events, geopolitics, Israel, Africa, marriage, family, education, everything in between. When I saw the whitewashing, the obfuscation, the reinterpreting, and sometimes out and out lying on many different platforms and different sources about Jimmy Carter's both presidency and then post-presidency, I was like, wow. And then somebody said, oh, don't speak. So I did a couple of posts and people were, don't speak ill of the dead. I did a little quick search. That is not a religious saying, either in Judaism or in Christianity, right? I'm pretty sure probably not in Islam either. It goes back, what I found, like about the 7th century BC in Greece, right? There's some sort of saying in, Latin about, or whatever, the Greek, I'm sorry, about, something about the dead or something, not saying something nice about the dead, whatever. It's not a thing, right? So I can understand respecting families and everything who are grieving and mourning. At the same time, lying about somebody, not lionizing, I don't know where that word comes from, right? You can actually, hey, they did these things, but man, and we have so many receipts, we couldn't get them into this whole show. So let's get it popping, right? So I want to start with a couple of things. I need to deal with this, and I'm saying this why. The title of this is that Jimmy Carter, what I call, my opinion, the father of the Islamist capture of America. Before you get to the 9/11s, before you get to the Muslim Brotherhood and CARE and Hamas, and before you get to that real infiltration throughout American society and on our campuses, it was already happening in terms of the disinformation, the whole Red-Green Alliance. But it was Jimmy Carter, starting with the whole helping usher in the Islamic Republic of Iran, and then post-presidency, we need to get into that. He probably more than any other single American in terms of a leader, especially with the prestige of having been a president, normalized Palestinian terrorism against Israel and against the United States and the world. Let me say it again. Jimmy Carter probably did more than any other American or Western leader to help normalize Arab-Palestinian terrorism, violence, and death against the Israelis, first and foremost, and then everywhere else. And again, we have our receipts for this. I want to start, actually, some of these sources that are here. It's so interesting. A couple of them in particular are from friends of mine, and who I actually happen to be journalists or different leaders in the community. And I think what I want to do is the apology part of it. So if I can do it this way, Yeah. This piece that you're looking at here is found in Newsweek. This was actually done a couple of years ago. I believe when Jimmy Carter turned 98. It's from my good friend Lisa Daftari of the Foreign Desk. You can find her name. Go and Google it. Check it out. She published this piece in Newsweek in July of 2023. Right, quoting. Carter's critics always point to his handling of the Iran hostage crisis as the most glaring flaw in his time in office. During the course of that 444-day nightmare, a student mob held 52 U.S. diplomats and civilians hostage, and no amount of negotiation or attempted military action could get them released. And they actually did try to do a military action that failed. This is during the Carter administration, 1979. Thankfully, that sad chapter finally ended on January the 20th, 1980, which just happened to be the day President Ronald Reagan took the oath of office at the U.S. Capitol. Let's go further. To be fair, Carter had plenty of assistance in his geopolitical blunder. His State Department seemed to effectively encourage the growing protests against the Shah, who was the leader of Iran at the time, the Shah's reign, which came to a head when Secretary of State Cyrus Vance announced that the Shah would leave on vacation for an indefinite period. But the final responsibility lies with Carter, who saw fundamentalist sharks circling an ailing Shah and helped engineer the rise of his disastrous successor by putting his trust in the exiled, soon-to-be leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Khomeini, or the Ayatollah Khomeini, and throwing the Shah, a decades-long U.S. ally, under the bus. Continuing the article, when the administration announced Carter would meet with European heads of state in January 1979, the Shah rightly understood that his departure from power was the main item on the agenda. 11 days later, out of options, he fled his own country. At that point, the fundamentalist takeover was all but inevitable. Last part, I believe. Of course, now we know the rest of the story. In 2016, the BBC obtained documents detailing how the quote, Carter administration paved the way, unquote, for Khomeini's return to Iran from exile. Carter administration officials familiar with the BBC report have not challenged its authenticity. Supporting the toppling of Shah was an historic blunder, one with reverberations that are still felt throughout Iran and the rest of the Middle East to this day. And if I could dare add to Lisa's article there, around the world. So in that article, you can go and check it out. The reason why, obviously, we put that on there with the graphics so you can check them out yourself, because the receipts that we're providing, we want you to make use of them yourself. In other words, don't take our word for it. I want you to check it out and see it for yourself. That's one of those articles from Lisa Daftari, and it's entitled Carter administration, I believe it is, why Jimmy Carter owes the Iranian people an apology. It's an opinion piece in Newsweek, and she brings all the receipts. She's a wonderful, very extraordinary journalist. Check that out there. I'm starting it there. Jimmy Carter, during his administration, among many things, helped usher in, we're not saying he did it himself, but what was our long-term ally. And I've heard all the arguments, the Shah, he had his flaws, and then there's just human rights abuses that were there. Yet I've heard about some of those things that happened under the Shah. From what I've been told, nothing compares to the type of death and destruction and the genocidal mentality that has been ensconced in Iran since 1979, since that revolution. Jimmy Carter played a hand in that. And it's interesting because even if one wanted to defend Jimmy Carter as innocent, or not having at least been as culpable as what both Lisa and other people have said, who are knowledgeable about what happened during the Carter administration of 1976 to 1980, when or 81, obviously when Ronald Reagan was actually 1980. I'm sorry, was he actually installed? Sorry about that. During the late 70s, coming to the 70s and the 80s, his one-term presidency. Not only are some people defending, and it's not wise to do so unless you took the whole thing. You'd have to look at both that situation, and we're skipping now, going forward in time from the 1970s to Carter's post-presidency, hence the title. because the Islamists that he helped usher in Iran, which is now the #1 state sponsor of terrorism. Again, you don't get an October the 7th without Iran backing Hamas. You don't get the Intifadas without Iran going in. Yasser Arafat, that famous picture of him just playing kissy face with the Ayatollah Khomeini, that was the Sunni Shia coming together to destroy the Jewish people, destroy Israel, and destroy the United States. So what you also had with Jimmy Carter, especially post-presidency, was the mindset of a man who championed Islamic terrorism against Israel and had his own very anti-Semitic views when it came to the Jewish people and when it came to Israel. So I want you to check this out too. Now, here's another article. This one is entitled "Carter Secretly Coached Arafat." And this one is from, I'll pull up for you 1 second quick. There's a couple of different ones. One was in the LA Times, but I think that the one that I chose to do, Carter, he coached Arafat. If I can do that here, boom. This one is from the Boston Globe. Deseret News from the Boston Globe. Again, I put the articles, clips on there so you can check them out yourself. I'm going to read from this article here. I'm just checking out something else here. Okay, so now here, I want you to check out this clip again. We're not going to do the whole article every time. We don't have time to do that, but I want you to see this article that was written in 1990. Again, 1990. I'm sorry, this is 1998. The article was written, but it's referring to 1990. What was 8 years ahead of that? At that time, Carter had been out of office for the past 10 years or so, right? From their first meeting in 1990, and I'm starting toward the mid part of the article, Carter and Arafat, quote, stayed in constant communication to getting this information from those giving it to the author. He actually cites where this information is coming from, and also talks about how the Carter administration, the Carter people knew what was being written. They didn't, once again, like Lisa said, they didn't refute it. They didn't refute anything, right? They stayed in constant communication from their first meeting in 1990. Brinkley writes, while Arafat agreed to distance himself, quote unquote, from radical elements in the Palestine Liberation Organization, which was a lie, he never did, Carter encouraged the PLO chairman to describe the Palestinian plight to the world community, see these quotes, in speeches designed to secure maximum sympathy. Right? I want you to see that. And the next part, it says, it could not be determined if Arafat ever used Carter's precise language, but the PLO leader did adopt a less belligerent way of talking about Palestinian distress. At the time of the Carter letter, Arafat was still struggling to overcome the pariah status he acquired, and rightly so, during his organization's years of violent resistance. This article doesn't even make any bones about it. It's not a pro-Israel article. It's letting you know this dude was a terrorist. The PLO would eventually win full recognition from the United States when Arafat appeared with the late Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin at a White House peace ceremony in 1993. So here in this piece here, I just quote a little short piece from there, a little clip from there, entitled, again from the Boston Globe, entitled Carter Secretly Coached Arafat. The beginning of that article, which I skipped, said that he really, really wanted to meet with Yasser Arafat. He really, really, really wanted to meet. So now, and we see now that one of the reasons why he really, really wanted to meet with Yasser Arafat, he wanted to coach him on how he needed to speak to the West. Jimmy Carter, now former president and humanitarian and statesman, wants to meet with the terrorist who's the chairman of the Palestine Liberation Organization. This is in 1990, so that he can, among other things, coach him to gain more acceptance by the Western powers. And it says, Arafat said he would distance himself. So now I want you to see something. 1990, for those of you who know anything about Middle East history, modern Middle East history especially, 1990 was, for example, some 18 years after the Munich massacre, in which terrorists slaughtered 11 Israeli Olympic competitors there in Munich, Germany. It was some 14 years after the raid on Entebbe, in which terrorists hijacked, we talked about this before in one of our early episodes, a plane carrying 100 Israelis, and they diverted the plane to Uganda, where Idi Amin helped these terrorists store these hostages. The Israeli Mossad or the actual commandos led by Bibi Netanyahu's brother had to go and rescue them. Again, this was after that. What am I saying? The blood on the hands of the Palestinian Liberation Organization and the PFLP, which is connected to it, was they just drenched in blood. And all this was during the time of Yasser Arafat. And ladies and gentlemen, 1990, which is when they finally met, was during the first Intifada. The first Intifada was from 1987 to 1993, right in the middle of one of the most deadly episodes for Israelis and for, unfortunately, even other Palestinians who got caught up in it, right? Yasser Arafat has unleashed hell on the Israelis. There's bus bombings and other suicide bombings. There's shootings. There's rock stone throwing. They are killing thousands of Israelis, both civilians and military, were actually killed or injured during this period. While the Intifada is raging, former President Jimmy Carter wants to meet with Yasser Arafat, not to tell him to stop the violence, but how he needs to couch it in terms, he needs to distance himself and couch it in terms that will be more palatable to the West. History has proven to us that Yasser Arafat continued to be very much a part of the violence that went on long after the 1990s, prided himself on it, right? But Jimmy Carter, his job, he felt, was to help Yasser Arafat sell it better. It's interesting to note, and I'm not going to delve into this because I've done this before. If you go to the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel and you check out, my book, Zionism in the Black Church, I talk about it. And I think we talk about it in Basic as well. You know, Jimmy Carter's ambassador to the UN was Andrew Young, who went on to become the mayor of Atlanta. And Andrew Young, it's interesting, he made a big uproar because he met with one of the leaders of the PLO secretly behind closed doors at that time still, when the PLO was registered as a terrorist organization. They still refused to acknowledge Israel's right to exist. It was a big furor. It was a big uproar. One of the articles that I quote from was the Andrew Young affair. It's in Commentary Magazine. You can Google that and check it out. The reason I'm pointing that out is that it's interesting that Andrew Young was Carter's UN representative, right? Carter tapped him for the job. And I've read nothing in which that said that Carter authorized it. It seemed to be Andrew Young's own doing to meet with representatives from the PLO. But I find it interesting that after Carter is no longer the president, he goes and meets with the head of the PLO, which has still not recognized Israel's right to exist. And he meets with him to tell him how he needs to schmooze it and do it a little bit differently, right? Do the little song, do the little dance. And from what we've seen, never really condemned the violence that the PLO was exacting. I said this before as well. In our Basic organization, the Basic discussion, which was, Basic is an acronym for Black Americans to Support Israel Committee, founded by Bayard Rustin and A. Philip Randolph, two of Dr. King's close friends and allies in the whole civil rights struggle. Dr. King had already passed away. He'd already been assassinated, but in 1975, they started an organization of Black Zionists, supporters of Israel. And one of the main things that their main spokesman would say, Bayard Rustin, he would talk about the violence that the PLO was visiting on the Israelis. And he said that if the United Nations and the international community did not condemn it, did not find it within themselves to really stand up and condemn the evil, it was going to be happening all over the place. He didn't use the term global terrorism, but he said there's going to be an endless stream. He said who knows how many organizations with a grudge against society, right? In other words, people were going to be inspired, some, mindless people, crazy people, wanting to destroy and burn everything down people are going to be inspired by what the PLO is doing, because not only are they doing violence against the Israelis, both civilians and military, and not with any real discussion about what peace looks like, just free Palestine. Once again, the PLO was formed in 1964 before the Israelis even had access to Judea and Samaria, including Jerusalem, right? So it was a fake organization that was set up by the PLO, by the KGB. We talked about this before. The Palestine Liberation Organization is an invention of the Soviet disinformation campaign, and we have all those receipts as well. Not getting into that. Carter should have known this as well, right? So fast forward to 1990, here's this now no longer President Jimmy Carter, one-term President Jimmy Carter. He wants to meet with the head of the terrorist organization that's slaughtering Israelis so that guy, Yasser Arafat, can package it better. This is one of the things that we're talking about. It's the beginning of the normalization of the terrorism that Bayard Rustin said in the 1970s was being visited on the Israelis, would be visited everywhere. He was referring to global terrorism, which is what we are all dealing with on today. Like the rape gangs that are actually going on. I'm here, we're just in a space talking about that. The Islamist rape of women has been going on in Africa and the Middle East literally for centuries. The difference between the Middle East and the West, where it's happening now, is that in the Middle East, it was forced upon them by this political Islam. Here in the West, we welcomed it with open arms. We opened up our borders, come from all of these different places. You don't got to worry about learning anything. Just come on in. And they did it for lots of different reasons, which I won't get into there right now. But anyway, that's what's happening now. Jimmy Carter, he doesn't stand up and say there needs to be an ending of the violence and you need to rebuke what Arafat is doing. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say Arafat needs to sell it differently, right? So that was the beginning of it. Let's go further. Here, there's an article that Daniel Greenfeld, journalist for a while. I've been following his work for years. I don't know this person personally. I do know Lisa Daftari, one other person I mentioned to you. I don't know Daniel Greenfeld personally. And he writes for lots of different publications. And he did this when I felt it was interesting that this particular piece that he wrote was on his and a couple of other sites. And the title of it is Jimmy Carter Was Never a Good Man. Yep. I'm going to say this again, ladies and gentlemen. And I hope you already see where I'm going. This is not some sort of a vendetta I have against Jimmy Carter or his family. No, this is not some sort of personal thing. I'm saying it again. I know about the person's track record. When I saw the disinformation, and it's still happening now, from Christian sites, like I said, and secular sites, and then Carter was this and Carter was that. So I'm going, wow. So this is clearly an effort on behalf of someone to paint a portrait of this man that's not only not accurate, but that if you understood the reality of it, you would understand some of the disinformation that especially comes from the left. It's happening on the right as well, but especially comes from the left and embracing this. This is why Hamas is seen as freedom fighters. Jimmy Carter had a lot to do with normalizing that. But let's just keep going. I give you that first part. Quote, Jimmy Carter, from the article, Jimmy Carter Was a Good Man by Daniel Greenfield. Sorry, Daniel. Jimmy Carter, after leaving office, claimed that the idea of opening the Carter Center came to him in a dream. More likely, it came to him by way of Abedi, who was there at its opening and who accompanied Carter to Pakistan and other Muslim countries. Abedi is this guy who's over this, all while the Bank of Credit and Commerce International, the BCCI, operated as a clearinghouse for Islamic terrorists responsible for hijackings and kidnappings. Carter took to it enthusiastically. In the decades leaving office, he began shilling for so many dictators that the full list would run for pages. Over the course of his long retirement, Jimmy Carter not only met with Gaddafi, we know he already met with Yasser Arafat, who had paid his brother $220,000, but with Zimbabwe's Mugabe, Kim Il-sung of North Korea, Venezuela's Maduro and Hugo Chavez, Syria's Assad, Fidel Castro in Cuba. And Carter not only met with them, he loved them and covered up for them. He claimed that he never, quote, he never doubted Hugo Chavez's commitment to improving the lives of millions of his fellow countrymen. Yes, that Hugo Chavez. And on Castro's death, remembered, quote, fondly our visits with him in Cuba and his love for his country, end quote. The more people Jimmy's tyrants killed, the harder he hugged them. Jimmy Carter loved terrorists, and so he not only embraced Arafat, but also Hamas. In April 2008, Jimmy Carter met with Hamas and claimed that the Islamic terrorists wanted to live in peace with Israel. Ever heard that before? Yes, Jimmy Carter is now pushing that in 2008, several years after Hamas has taken over in Gaza, after Israel willingly withdrew. Hamas and the Palestinian Authority were willing together. Hamas stages a coup, pushes the Palestinian Authority out, and immediately starts launching rockets and the whole thing. The Hamas, that same Hamas that staged October the 7th, Jimmy Carter is shilling for them. The next month, quoting the quote, as a peaceful gesture, Hamas fired a rocket at an Israeli shopping mall, wounding 90, including a mother and her 3-year-old daughter. Again, this article is not blaming that on Carter. It's saying that Carter was shilling for them. But the more tyrants and terrorists Jimmy Carter met with, the more he built up his reputation as a good man just trying to fix the world. But Carter wasn't fixing the world by empowering some of the worst mass murderers in the world. He was continuing to break it and make it worse. You can check that one out as well. Again, the title of that article is from Daniel Greenfield. Jimmy Carter was never a good man. Daniel always brings the receipts as each of these here. So Daniel Daniel explains to us that not only did Jimmy Carter long to meet with Yasser Arafat and did so in 1990, he also shilled for Hamas, not condemning the violence, not condemning the burn and the blood and the mayhem, but ignoring it, giving them a good face, as well as Castro, as well as Gaddafi, as well as Hugo Chavez. And why? Apparently, again, that leftist ideology that somehow these people, no matter how bloodthirsty, amount of their own people that they slaughter, that somehow they have some sort of righteous social justice cause. Jimmy Carter, again, the father of that insanity, wrapping their arms around Islamic terrorism as they slaughter Israelis, and then it spreads all over the place, as well as communist dictators and others. While he has, but Pastor Jimmy Sani, Habitat for Humanity, great. I know a lot of people who work with that organization back in the day when I was in California. Great. I'm Habitat for Humanity, great cause. How does that negate the empowering of terrorists and the slaughtering of countless thousands of people? It doesn't. So if you're going to be one of these outlets that's talking about, Carter did all these wonderful things, and not tell them that he was doing these other very nefarious, evil things as well, you're not doing a good thing by the people who are listening to you. Scott Jennings, I know he's a correspondent. I don't know if he's a politician as well. He was on CNN last week, and he had this to say about Carter's post-presidency in particular.
Terrible president. That's why he lost in a landslide after his one term. And if it's possible, I think he was even a worse ex-president because of his meddling in U.S. foreign policy, because of his saddling up to dictators around the world, because of his vehement views, anti-Israel views, and more than dabbling in anti-Semitism over the years. He often vexed Democrats. Obama didn't even have him speak at his 2008 convention. He put Bill Clinton in a terrible foreign policy box on a North Korea nuclear issue. I think he was a guy who had a huge ego and believed that he was uniquely positioned to do all these things, even after the American people had roundly and soundly rejected his leadership. So I respect people who run for president and get elected president, but in his particular case, I think he time and again proved why he was never suited for the office in the first place.
I don't often say this, but Scott, I agree with you to a certain extent. President Carter was meddlesome with his successors. He forgot sometimes that he still wasn't president. For all the meddlesome behavior as a post-president, which is well documented, I don't think that it outweighs the contribution that he made as a global citizen after he left.
So can I just offer one retort, which is this. In the run-up to the Persian Gulf War, he wrote letters
I know about this,
to all of our allies and to Arab states, asking them to abandon their cooperation and coalition with the United States of America. If it's not treasonous, it's borderline treasonous. And so I hear what you're saying about the humanitarianism, but when you're an ex-president and you have served in that office, I think you have a duty to the United States and only to the United States. And when he did that and other instances, to me, it showed that he cared more about his own legacy than he did about the country, and I think that is wrong.
Regardless, to that last point, of what you think about the Gulf War, any of those things, Carter was no longer president. And for him to write to our allies about that war and tell them to bail on the actual alliance using the fact that he was a president, using that actual status, again, I agree with Scott 100%. If it's not treasonous, it's borderline treasonous. Right? And the guy, I don't know who the guy's name who's pushing back on Scott. Yeah, you know, he was a problematic guy, but he was such a humanitarian, and that's somehow we can't talk about him empowering terrorism and empowering global terrorism. Part of the mess that we're in is because of people like Jimmy Carter. Somehow that's off limits, but we can talk about, oh, he's such a humanitarian. It doesn't work that way. I didn't even get prepared the information for the Carter Foundation, I believe it is. The Carter Foundation is an organization that, among other things, it facilitates trips to Israel and calling it Palestine. And it does all under the guise of peace and freedom and all those things. If you notice, one of the things that Scott actually mentioned was anti-Semitism, which we haven't really touched on yet. We're about to. So here you are trying to broker peace, right? Where you're not even calling out Palestinian terrorism against Israel. So you're not brokering peace, but you have some serious anti-Semitic views. So I want to go to that here. So he mentioned it, and there's lots of different examples, and I want to give it to you. There's one of my friends, Mr. Charles Jacobs, wrote this piece, I believe, he wrote it on he published it somewhere else, but I also saw that he did it on JNS. So I pulled it from JNS. I want to do this for you too. Okay, this is Charles Jacobs from Americans for Peace and Tolerance. He's also from the African Jewish Alliance. Charles has been doing work for decades when it comes to, freeing African slaves. Charles is one of the people who put it on the map so that Westerners would know what was going on with the Islamist capture and enslavement of Africans in Sudan and Mauritania and other places. Charles wrote this piece after Carter's death. It could not be determined if Arafat ever used. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, my bad. Boom. Okay. All right. So I'm sorry, you all. I messed up. That's why I love doing it live. And then that's also difficult to do it live as well. All right. So let me pull up the article. I'm going to read for you the article, if I can. I think I can pull it up this way as well. I want to read just a clip of the article for you. Now, the title of the article, you saw it on there. I might show it to you again. The actual graphic was correct, but what was not correct was the actual what I'm trying to say, the actual quote. So let me show you this to you again. Can I do it this way? Boom. The title of the article is Jimmy Carter, surprise, he hated Jews, not just Israel. Now that quote is not correct, but let me actually give you the quote that I wanted to give you from there. I'll just read you the quote from that actual article. Again, this is about Jimmy Carter's feelings toward Jews as well. He talks about some of this in his sermons that they actually got from there. All right, so let me see here. We know that this because many of the post-presidential activities included teaching Sunday school. 2007, Simon & Schuster released a 13-disc CD box set of recorded sermons that Carter gave at Maranatha Baptist Church in his hometown of Plains, Georgia, called, quote, Sunday Morning in Plains, end quote. The sermons contain a slew of chillingly pre-modern anti-Semitic prejudices. For example, he claimed that Judaism teaches Jews to feel superior to non-Jews, which is a blatant lie, that Jewish religious practices are a sleazy trick to enhance personal wealth, again, a lie, and that the current Israeli policy towards Palestinians is based on these Jewish values and practices. So Jimmy Carter, in his Sunday school and his sermons, would get up and tell people that not only are the Israelis mistreating the Palestinians, no mention of Hamas, no mention of the PLO, but that their religion tells them that does that sound familiar to you? It sound familiar that the Jewish supremacy and they're treating people, did that sound like the Nick Fuenteses and the Candace Owens and the rest of these, wackadoo right-wing, the Jews think that Carter was saying this as an old man who's a humanitarian, right? Let's keep going, right? So then from here, I want to keep just a little bit more of the quote here. It says that, I'm still quoting from, and again, this is called surprise. It is called Jimmy Carter, surprise, he hated Jews, not just Israel. It's in JNS. JNS.org is written by my friend Charles Jacobs. I want to see this last part. In the sermons recorded between 1998 and 2003, Carter attacked Israel by retreading anti-Semitic tropes dating back to the Gospels and parasitic writings of the early church. These anti-Judaic beliefs were formulated not in the 1960s or the 1970s, but between the 1st and 5th centuries CE. Again, he's talking about not in the scriptures. He's actually talking about this was happening in centuries after the early church, quote unquote, ensuring well over a millennia of institutional, lethal Christian anti-Semitism. Speaking of Jews, supposedly a supposed air of superiority to non-Jews, the former president said in one lecture, quote, "This morning, I'm going to be trying to relate the assigned Bible lesson to us in the uniform series, with how that affected Israel and how it affects us through Christ personally. It's hard for us to even visualize the prejudice against Gentiles when Christ came on earth. If a Jew married a Gentile, that person was considered to be dead." Listen to this, everyone. How would you characterize from a Jew's point of view the uncircumcised non-believer? This is Carter's words. And what? Unclean? What? They called them dogs. That's true. Listen to this last part and I'll be done with this quote. What was Paul? He's talking about the Apostle Paul. What was Paul's feelings towards Gentiles in his early life before his conversion? Meaning that. Anybody? He says, absolute commitment to persecution, to the imprisonment and even the execution of non-Jews who now professed faith in Jesus Christ. When I saw that quote, because Carter's sermons, I've never read and listened to Carter's sermons. He says in his sermon that Paul persecuted non-Jews who became Christians. And that's nowhere in the scriptures. Paul's persecution before he became converted and believed that Jesus was the Messiah, before he became a Christian, Paul persecuted first and foremost Jews. He would go to synagogues and go to different towns and find people, but Jews and Gentiles who were Christians. But his main focus was Jews because he felt that it was a destruction of the Jewish faith. That's how he was actually raised. So where Carter gets off saying that Paul was after, before he was converted, was after Gentiles, that somehow Paul, the Jewish apostle, because they were all Jewish, singled out Gentile. It's a lie and a nasty blood libel. What's the point, Pastor Masani? How is this dude going to broker peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians when he has all of these issues where Jews are concerned? Again, he is the forerunner to this modern age of Christian anti-Semitism. The whole Christ is King group, right? And he is king. You keep saying the person. Yes, Christ is king. I'm a believer that Jesus is the Messiah, king of the universe. That's me. I'm a Christian. Here's the thing. The people who are using it while they attack Israel, Jimmy Carter, the one who actually, I didn't put this on there, when his books was entitled Palestine, Peace, Not Apartheid, he helped coin the phrase Israel as an apartheid state, making it a household name in the West, and especially in certain Christian circles. He took his anti-Semitism and his disdain, or at least his bias against Israel. He married these two, and as this nice, kind, old, former president and Baptist Sunday school teacher and everything, this dude was spewing out just straight Jew hatred and Israel hatred. And the reason why people get uncomfortable, oh no, he's not. Yeah, I'm not trying to spit on his grave. I'm just telling you that this is who this dude is. If y'all stop lying about it, right, then we could. Yes, that was from that article. Oh, let's keep going. We have lots of receipts. I'm almost done here. I want to do one of the. I want to talk about back up here now during the controversy that was the Iranian affair, when the rebels in Iran who overthrew the Shah again went to the embassy. These college students in Iran took these Americans hostage. There's another article here that's entitled Carter's Visa Crackdown Won't Hurt Immediately. Now, this is about the fact that Carter actually signed an executive order that was to two things, basically. The executive order that Carter signed was to any Iranians in America who had any type of visa violation would be sent back immediately, and then also would keep Iranians from coming to the country from Iran. This was while the hostages were being held in Iran, in Tehran, unless they could demonstrate with great specificity and with great detail the reason why they were fleeing, whether it was religious or political, that type of thing. That was the outside veneer of it, but there was much more to it. Now, I want to say this right off the bat before I show you this little article excerpt. I will give to the Carter administration the difficulty that and the chaos and the confusion that ensued after the hostages were taken in Tehran. This is it goes without saying that this was an extremely difficult time. Can only imagine what a president had to deal with. But what's interesting is that in the telling of the story, it was funny that when Trump, they accused him of a Muslim ban. Some people tried to talk about, okay, first of all, it wasn't a Muslim ban. It was where terrorism was actually coming from, right? But it was also ignored what Jimmy Carter did in the 70s. Quote from the Washington Post, and this piece is from 1980. Carter announced Monday he was canceling all visas issued to Iranians for entry into the United States and warned that they would be revalidated only for compelling and proven humanitarian reasons for or where the national interest requires. Okay, so now it makes it very, very stringent for your visas to be renewed. It says here, continuing on the article, since the 50 American hostages were seized, again, this was written during the time while the hostages are still being held, November the 4th, more than 14,000 Iranians have been admitted to the United States, about half of them religious minorities who fear persecution under the regime of the Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. Officials have said about 14,700 Iranians have left the United States in the same period, according to figures from the Immigration and Naturalization Service, right? So they're talking about here the controversy of in which Iranians, both Iranian Americans or Iranians in America and the Iranians in Iran will be affected. I'm jumping down to another part of the article here where it says, while the administration's public posture has been a hard line against Iranian visa holders, its unstated policy has aimed at trying to help the religious minorities who have fled Iran, several officials said. Now, again, here's where the snow job is being done. They're actually in this piece, and I don't know, I guess Washington Post has always been a leftist piece. I don't know what it was back in the 1980s directly, but they're telling the reader, here's where we want you to see him in a certain light. It's gone from reporting to now commentating. Some private and congressional refugee, continuing on, experts refuse to discuss the issue because of fear that Khomeini will retaliate against those religious minorities, mostly Jews, Baha'is, and remain in Iran. The Washington Post reported last month that it was estimated that half of the 80,000 Jews in Iran had left since the revolution that toppled Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. This current gentleman, that's his father, had a chance to be a couple of events with the prince of Iran. Most went to Israel, but thousands entered the United States, officials said. And let me just say this real briefly. Once again, that's why they needed Israel. They fled, and they were only going to be safe if they could either make it to Israel or to some other free country. They were being persecuted as Jews, right? That was actually what was going on during this time of all of this confusion. Now, why do I mention that to you? For two reasons again. Number one, I'm showing you the way that the media is trying to portray Carter, not in a fair light and saying, here's the other stuff that the dude actually did, but that the president actually did, both as president and as former president, right? But also to show you the type of reporting that would be done. Carter singled out the Iranian population. Now, again, because of what was going on, whether you think he was right or not, here's the thing. Look at how it gets reported so smoothly. It's like, you have to understand what was actually going on. And then Trump, during his administration, 2016, 2020, actually says, okay, hey, all this violence jumping off and it's Islamist violence. We need to put a freeze on all immigration, especially from these particular parts of the world. Oh, Trump hates Muslims. Like, you didn't get Carter hates Iranians. Oh, Carter hates Muslims. Carter didn't get any of that pushback, once again, because the Islamist thing had already begun to sit in. Somehow, this Islamist is fine. We need to come for the Jews, right? Okay, so now, a friend of mine just happened to me. I saw a video that she posted. Dr. Sheila Nazarian. She is a plastic surgeon down there in LA. Had a chance to meet her a couple of times. Does wonderful work. I mean, plastic surgery work, I'm sure. You know what I'm saying, but she does all kinds of these different business ventures and everything. She actually is an amazing advocate. And this is what she had to say. I want to share her video. Now, this is connected to the Iranian, the visas and that type of thing. And she tells her story about how her family came to this.
Dark obsession with Israel and actually.
Let's start it again.
Excuse me for not mourning the passing of Jimmy Carter. Not only did he have a dark obsession with Israel and actually legitimize the delegitimization of the state of Israel, but I have a personal story. Many years ago, before COVID, I was asked to sponsor an event at UCLA, and I said, okay. Showed up not really knowing what it was, and it was a gentleman speaking who served in the Carter administration. He speaks about reading about how Jews were turned away when they were on a boat trying to escape Nazi Germany, and how the US sent them back to their deaths, and he swore that if he was ever in a position to save people, he would. So fast forward, and he's working under President Carter, and Carter puts a executive order that all Iranians in America should be shipped back to Iran. These are the sons of people who worked under the Shah, studying in America. These are Iranians that basically would be killed if they were sent back to Iran. So what this gentleman did is he figured out that if they all fill out asylum applications, and he hides the asylum applications in a closet where no one is able to process them, then legally these people cannot be shipped back to Iran. And he didn't stop there. He also allowed for the applications for asylum of people who were in Iran. He was working with an organization called HIAS to help get more Jewish, Baha'i, minority Iranians who would be persecuted and possibly killed to America and out of Iran. Guess how my family got out of Iran? With the help of HIAS. So I'm sitting there in UCLA listening to this gentleman speak, who is talking about how not only did he go against Jimmy Carter's executive order to get all of the Iranians in America back to Iran, but also helped Iranians get out of Iran and come to America. That is how my family got to America, with the help of HIAS. So imagine my surprise. I'm in UCLA, showed up to an event, I didn't know who the speaker was, and this man who's speaking was responsible for saving my family and helping us come to America. So am I mourning the passing of Jimmy Carter? I guess on one hand I should be thankful, because if it wasn't for him ruining Iran and making this executive order to basically condemn all Iranians to death and persecution, being fought by this gentleman speaking at UCLA, and eventually leading to the success of my family in immigrating to America. I guess I should thank Carter. Thank you, President Carter, because now I'm in America, a country I love so much. But Iranians today are not mourning President Carter. I want you all to know that. This man was not a saint, and possibly one of the worst presidents in American history.
I want you to juxtapose Dr. Sheila's account, her personal account, with, among other things, an official in the Carter White House, with that piece that I just excerpted for you from the Washington Post. According to the official that she was, the event where he was speaking, it was much more nefarious. Now, is he being accurate about his assessment? That's not my point. My point is that the media gave Carter more than the benefit of the doubt. He has to, and you got to watch out for, the immigration and those terrorism. Okay, I get it, right? But it's amazing how the story gets told a certain way, because one of the things that Jimmy Carter began to do, starting with helping usher in the Ayatollahs in the first place, and then in his post-presidency, meeting with thugs like Yasser Arafat, like Maduro, not the rest of them, particularly when it comes to the Arab Palestinian terrorism against Israel, he helped normalize it. And I guess because he was a progressive, because he was a leftist, it was A-okay. No problem. There was not the scrutiny given to him by the press. And now he's passed away. And now we're acting like none of this happened, that he didn't empower the Islamic Republic of Iran, that he didn't give a green light to the Palestinian terrorism that was Yasser Arafat, the PLO. No, somehow none of that happened. It's just he was a humanitarian. So many of the Jewish friends that I have, Persian friends, Iranian friends, both Christian and Jewish, that have very similar stories about here's what really happened, or at least here's from what we saw, both in Iran and what was going on here. Yes, could go on and on. Gonna stop from there. This is the Jimmy Carter that's being lauded and applauded. And when we fast forward now and we look at the type of disinformation when Hamas and the PLO and Iran are concerned, who was the person first shaking all these hands and hugging and kissing all these folks? Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter was the president and the former president who most facilitated and most carried water for the same Palestinian terrorism that's happening right now today. And, oh, by the way, as a self-professed, very, very devout Christian, mangled the scriptures, mangled actual teaching of the word of God, and brought all of his Jew hatred to his Bible teachings. Exactly what we're dealing with right now. People need to know. You're saying bad things? People need to know. All right. So again, this is the live one, but again, you can check it out. The links on here, if you see it, if you're watching this on LinkedIn, if you're watching this on YouTube, and even on X, you'll see the links that I gave. There's one link that I did not give, which was the Washington Post one. I actually gave a Breitbart article that was a commentary on President Carter's executive order where Iranian Americans were concerned, and also immigration to America from Iran. And so that article, I didn't quote from it. It's not that it's not a good one. It is. I want to make sure I just kind of streamlined it to a certain degree. So check that one out too on there. You'll see it on the link. I didn't quote it from here, but I will be sharing some more about that on another post as you see some of these other clips that are going up. All right. So wanted to share that with you. All right. So now one quick announcement, PSA from out. So I'll be on the road. I'll be in Miami, Florida, starting tomorrow for about 3 days, having some events, having some meetings. And then the rest of the week, I'll be in San Diego, California. Miami, I'll be with our friends out at Camera. Shout out to y'all. Looking forward to being with you guys at your brunch on Wednesday. And then also for IAC, which is the Israeli American Council. They are not headquartered in San Diego, but they will have a special event that's happening out there. I'll be with both of those groups, and I'll be shout out to Pastor Dennis Hodges. If you're listening to this at all, I'll be reaching out to you, sir. I want to sit down with you, check out with you, and talk to some of the Black pastors in the San Diego area while I'm there. I won't be able to do it in Miami because there's some other stuff that's scheduled. But having said that, I want to also make this announcement as well, that the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, ibsi.org, will be launching its in-person, for 2025, its in-person forum on Israel, Africa, and Black America. Let me give you that announcement here. I think I queued it up the right way. Let's check it out. In 2022, IBSI launched its online forum on Israel, Africa, and Black America. Each Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern, we discuss Israel, Africa, the Black American community, and how all these topics are interrelated. In September 2024, we partnered with the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews and launched the forum as an all-day in-person seminar for a small group of 25 pastors and ministry leaders. In this setting, we unpack the most crucial Israel-related topics that uniquely impact the Black American and African communities. The gathering was a tremendous success. In 2025, we will host the in-person forums in cities across the country, inviting Black and African pastors to join us and bring all of your questions. Nothing is off the table. Join us for this discussion of the Bible, history, music, geopolitics, and Black American heritage. IBC's Forum on Israel, Africa, and Black America. Visit ibsi.org/dates to see the forum schedule. You can also email info@ibsi-now.org for information on hosting a forum in your area. Looking forward to seeing you there. And as you can see, our first city will be Charlotte, North Carolina, our home where we are now. So Charlotte, North Carolina, Black pastors, and it's not just for Black and African pastors. Other people can come, but our primary focus is there because of the material that we'll be unpacking that is specific when it comes to how the issue of Israel, Africa, and all those things impact the Black community. So ibsi.org/date. You can go and sign up. I believe our venue is going to be at Dr. Michael Stevens Church, a City Church here in Charlotte. So that information will be up as well. It's Thursday, 3 weeks from now, Thursday, January the 23rd, ibsi.org/dates. Get some more information, and you'll be able to register there in the next 24 to 40 hours as well. Want you to be able to join us there for the IBC's Forum on Israel, Africa, and Black America. Again, it's an all-day thing from around 10 a.m. to around 2 or so. There's lunch that's served. There's a continental breakfast. Everything will feed us. Everything. Have a great time. Again, so glad for our partners there at the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews as well. All right, everyone. Wrong thing there. Do I got the right one? Now I got the right one. All right, everyone. Great being with you on today. You guys have a great rest of your week. We're seeing you on Tuesday. Say more about that soon.
Truth to Power Live with Jimmy Study Washington.